Chapter 1177, Drums of War. Shadow Slave. The drums of war were booming all across Antarctica. Well, nothing that noticeable was happening, really. The great clans were mobilizing forces with a silent efficiency that was both subtle and frightening. If one did not know what to look for, they would remain blissfully unaware of the fact that the whole continent would be soon shaken by the fallout of a historic battle. Sunny, however, knew. In the port fortress, the thunder of the cannonade had grown silent. The horde of nightmare creatures had been dealt with, and the tired soldiers were descending from the walls. Instead of going to rest, however, they were quietly listening to new orders and starting to prepare for an immediate departure. The mundane soldiers were checking their equipment with calm, businesslike expressions. The awakened, who would usually not dismiss their enchanted armor in the field, strangely wore simple uniforms, knowing how dire the near future promised to be. They wanted to give all their memories a chance to be fully repaired. The administrative personnel were frantically working to rearrange logistical chains and prepare the force for a sudden expedition. There were many signs like that. They were especially apparent when one compared the behavior of the Valor soldiers with that of the evacuation army staff. The latter were tiredly celebrating the victory, while the former seemed more focused than when they had been battling the abominations. The Nightmare Gate does not seem to be located inside of a siege capital. Sunny found a calm and dark corner within the keep of the fortress and leaned on the wall. He had managed to determine the nature of the area where the entrance to the Black Skull Citadel was located by spying on the Valor administrative staff. Any large-scale movement of military forces involved a certain amount of logistical work, and one could infer many things from these preparations. From the looks of it, Clan Valor was preparing to venture into the wilderness of East Antarctica. The distance they had to traverse also didn't seem to be small, so that put some of Sunny's worries to rest. Still, there was a lot to consider. Sunny knew what the great clans would do, and what he himself had to do. However, what would the government's response be? As someone with the title of a special government envoy, he should be receiving a call soon. And indeed, not a few minutes later, his communicator lit up because of an incoming transmission. Sunny summoned the Bone Singer, enveloped his surroundings in silence, and answered. The sharp face of Saint Cor appeared on the holographic screen, soon joined by the pleasant visage of Soul Reaper Jet. The gaunt Transcendent spoke first. I'll assume that both of you are already familiar with the situation. What I want to know is what caused this mess. His grating voice sounded calm, but Sunny could feel the angry and tense undertone in it. He briefly glanced at the projection of Jet, then answered, I think I can provide an explanation. Both of them paid rapt attention to his words. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then spoke, choosing his words carefully. It appears that a citadel was discovered in the Nightmare Desert. Clan Valor was the first to find it, but their attempt at capture failed. Now, both clans have an equal chance to come into possession of a crucial advantage. A direct confrontation for access to the Nightmare Gate leading to the citadel seems inevitable. He paused, and then added evenly, they are going all out. As Saint Cor's face darkened, J nodded. I can confirm. Sunny did not know what the veteran saint was thinking about, but he felt chills even through the holographic projection. Even though Wake of Ruin's expression did not change much, it felt as though the world itself subtly changed instead, reacting to his wrath, discontent, contempt, dejection, maybe. The old man grimaced. What immaculate timing. At least he could still be sarcastic. Sunny had to imagine that the two great clans suddenly shifting to active warfare was like a disaster for the government. Saint Cor would have to completely rearrange the disposition of the evacuation army and come up with a new strategy. Even then, it might not be enough. Then again, Army Command had to have been prepared for something like this, even if it was the worst-case scenario for them. They were no fools. After a long pause, Wake of Ruin shook his head, then looked at Sunny and Jet again. Valor and Song might be arrogant, but they are not unreasonable. This bloodshed can still be prevented. Maybe. Similar things have happened before. A large-scale battle can be avoided if they agree to hold a duel between two champions instead. Sunny couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. He didn't doubt the wisdom and experience of the seasoned Transcendent, but he also didn't believe that the great clans would step down. Especially not because of something as quaint as an honor duel. They were like sharks that smelled blood in the water, those from Valor were, at least. They had been holding back their bloodlust for too long, already. Still. Was there really a chance that a strange duel between two powerful warriors could replace a wasteful battle? It seemed improbable, but then again, legacies were often weird about such things. Saint Cor let out a heavy sigh, and then added, "The problem this time is that both sides seem to be certain that they will win if the battle actually happens. So, they have no reason to seek an alternative. Additionally, they have been acting slightly erratic as of late. It is hard to say what will actually happen." Seemingly coming to a decision, the Gaunt Transcended nodded and threw a piercing gaze at Sunny and Jet. "The two of you will remain with the emissaries and follow them to that nightmare gate. Gather as much information as you can, while you're at it. I will arrive personally and try to mediate an acceptable resolution." Jet remained silent for a moment. "Understood, sir." However, Sunny was not as agreeable. "What if you can't?" His irreverent question, or maybe the fact that he even dared to ask a question, seemed to surprise the old saint. Wake of Ruin stared at him darkly. After a brief pause, he said simply, "Then we withdraw and try to salvage the aftermath." With that, he terminated the call. The gaunt face of the government saint disappeared, leaving Sunny and Jet alone. Soul Reaper looked at him and smiled. How can she even smile in this situation? Oh, my. I know that look. You're thinking about doing something crazy, aren't you? Sunny glanced at her darkly and shrugged. I don't even know what is crazy anymore. Jet chuckled. That is not a good sign at all. He studied her face somberly, then said quietly, if Wake of Ruin fails in his negotiation, Valor and Song will really clash. At that point, the best move would be to support one side against the other, in order to preserve as many fighters as possible. Are you ready to make that decision? Soul Reaper's smile grew bleak. The government can't break its neutrality. Even if it's beneficial at the moment, the consequences would be catastrophic in the long run. Sunny simply stared at her. I am not asking about the government. I am asking about you. There were times when people could not escape making tough choices. Sunny had long made his, and Jet would have to follow suit, whether she wanted to or not. Of course, doing nothing was also a choice. However, she had always positioned herself as a cog in the government machine, but maybe it was time for Soul Reaper to think for herself. Sunny hoped that she would, at least. Jet lingered for a while before answering. Eventually, she said, let's see how it goes. Then, her face disappeared. The screen of the communicator switched off, leaving Sunny in the darkness. He sighed and dismissed the Bone Singer, then left his temporary shelter. An all-out battle. Or a duel of two champions. I wonder which one will end up happening. He hoped for the best, but had to prepare for the worst. Chapter 1178, Long Drive. Although both clans were assembling their armies with urgent haste, it was not an easy thing to move a military force across East Antarctica. The wilderness was infested with countless abominations, and nightmare gates were everywhere, making every route slow and dangerous. Clan Valor was in a slightly better position because they had coincidentally pulled most of their forces together prior to Mordred's revelation, in order to destroy a migrating horde of nightmare creatures. Still, there were many warriors and assets that had been left behind in the siege capitals, who now had to join the main body of the great clan's contingent. There was Saint Tyrus, for example. The fact that Dire Fong had been able to join Silent Stalker in ambushing Whispering Blade proved that she alone was not enough to contain the enemy Transcendent, so there was no point in keeping her in a distant government siege capital. So, Sky Tide had been recalled, and was en route to join the war party. There were other squires and even knights that had to be summoned, as well. So, for the first few days, progress had been slow. Most of the mundane personnel had been left behind, and now only the awakened were following Morgan toward the fateful Nightmare Gate. Nevertheless, their number was too great to pass unnoticed, and so, skirmishes with nightmare creatures happened almost every hour. Many of these skirmishes threatened to grow into something more serious if not resolved swiftly. In these cases, either Morgan's echoes or one of the saints joined the melee to prevent the small-scale confrontations from becoming dire battles. Sunny was not required to participate in them, of course. Actually, he found himself in a somewhat awkward situation. No one had really invited him to join the expedition, and his status was more vague than ever. Officially, he was the government's envoy whose duties concerned the cooperation between Clan Valor and the evacuation army. However, the Great Clan had more or less abandoned the pretense of being in the southern quadrant to help, and was acting against the government's interests. So what was an envoy supposed to do in that situation, exactly? Why was he even needed? Sunny did not have a good explanation, but luckily, no one asked. Whether it was because the warriors of valor couldn't be bothered or simply did not care, he did not know. In any case, they mostly left him alone. In fact, Sunny was basically ignored. Even Morgan seemed to have forgotten about his existence, which was not too surprising. She had much bigger issues to worry about than the whereabouts of a neutral government ascended. So, Sunny simply stayed in one of the APCs assigned to the Fire Keepers. The Fire Keepers themselves were gone, though most of them had already entered the seeds, so he had the vehicle all to himself. Nephi's and Cassie would appear from time to catch a few hours of sleep, but other than that, he remained alone. That gave him a lot of time to think. Sitting in the pilot's seat and driving the APC across the hellish remains of Antarctica, which looked much more like a piece of the dream realm now than that of the waking world, he somberly considered the past. It was funny, really. Sunny had come to Antarctica to pursue his personal goals, not caring much about anything else. But now, he somehow ended up caring about the mission of the evacuation army enough to disregard his personal interests. He used to mock selfless people, but now, he was ready to do something selfless at a great cost to himself. Was it like that? No, not really. In the end, everything Sunny did was for himself. He was not trying to protect the refugees because it was the right thing to do or out of some kind of moral obligation. He was doing it simply because he wanted to. That was his desire. He was just trying to fulfill his own desires. Sunny had wanted to survive at all costs once, but then, it was not enough anymore. He had wanted to be strong once, but now, it was not enough anymore, either. He had strength, but what was the point of having strength if he couldn't achieve what he wanted with it? What Sunny really wanted now was to use his strength to shape the world in a way that suited his wishes. Shaping reality with strength. That was power. So, was he lusting for power now? Controlling the APC, Sunny frowned. Then what about freedom? That had been his real goal all along, after all. Coming to Antarctica was a means to achieve that goal, but instead, he found himself bound to more people, more places, more things. He was more restricted now than he had ever been. Before, what had restricted him were circumstances beyond his control. Now, he was bound by his own desires. On second thought, it's not that funny. Sunny now understood better than ever why the demon of desire had been one of the most powerful among the demons, second to none. Except for Weaver. But was it really a bad thing? So what if he was compelled by the things he wanted? So what if he was bound to people, ideas, and values? Maybe it was not a bad thing, after all. Simply because he had chosen these bonds himself. Sunny understood that, and yet, a small part of him rebelled against such thoughts. That part still wanted to be unrestrained and not beholden to anything. To be free. That part had to take a backseat for now, though. Because he had to finish what he had started. Even if it was futile, Sunny had to do his best to see the evacuation of the citizens of Antarctica through. After that, well, he would see what else there was to do. His dreams seemed more distant than ever, but strangely enough, Sunny found himself calm and determined. His mind was set. Maybe that was the true conviction. The thought made him uncomfortable. Chapter 1179, Measure of Growth. The war party had stopped and made camp. Sunny's APC was parked within the defensive perimeter, and he was calmly preparing supper. It seemed strange to be doing something so mundane on the verge of an event that had the potential to alter the course of history, but he was hungry. Hunger was much more powerful than the forces that shaped history. Ah. I miss the Rhino. The armored vehicle that the Fire Keepers had used was by no means cheap, but its amenities were rather bare bones. There was not even an integrated kitchen, just a few devices for food storage and preparation. Still, he was good at improvising. As Sunny cooked, he mentally went over what he had gained since coming to Antarctica, and what he could use if the worst happened and the two great clans clashed in a bloody battle. Sunny had been a master for many months before the Chain of Nightmares, but he felt that he only came into his ascended powers here. His mastery of shadow manifestation had improved tremendously, both in terms of impact and versatility. He also developed Shadow Shell and Shadow Incarnation, as well as their combination. Both of these abilities were extremely powerful. His practical knowledge of sorcery had grown as well. He was now able to copy more complex enchantments, and do it faster. He could even modify them to a degree. Even though the realities of the Antarctica campaign had prevented Sunny from spending a lot of time on weaving, his repertoire was much broader than before. There were new powerful memories in his arsenal, including transcendent ones. The Sin of Solace, the Shroud of Graceless Dusk, and others. There was the Mirror of Truth, too. Chances were, he would have to use it soon. In terms of raw power, Sunny was now a tyrant. He had 5 cores and 5 shadows, which increased both his physical prowess and essence capacity. Strangely enough, even his essence control had undergone a noticeable improvement. Unable to rely on the Soul Serpent in the dire conditions of the southern quadrant, Sunny had been forced to elevate this aspect of his power to an almost flawless efficiency. Then there were his shadows. He had gained a new one, the Ravenous Fiend. Now that Imp had feasted on the remains of the Sun Prince, the scrawny goblin was strong enough to be sent into battle. Nightmare was close to both ascension and unlocking his terror ability. Saint had risen both in class and rank, becoming a transcendent devil. That alone was an incredible leap for him, but the sublimation of the mantle of the underworld was perhaps no less important. His new attribute, the Marble Shell, improved his resilience and combat performance to a remarkable degree. Honestly, having it was almost like possessing a secondary aspect. Considering all that, it was hard to deny that the present Sunny was incomparably more powerful than his past self from before Antarctica. The comparison was not even funny. That past Sunny was nothing more than a feeble brat. Ironically, Sunny had come to the southern quadrant in search of strength, and although he stopped caring about that goal a long time ago, he ended up achieving it nevertheless. Despite it all, though, he felt that there were much more valuable things he had gained here. Things that went far beyond shadows, memories, and attributes. The experience he had gained, the skills he had honed, the lessons he had learned, those were what truly separated him from his past self. Those were what made him truly stronger. From the darkness of the polar night and the desperation of the Antarctic center to the cold expanse of East Antarctica and its many dangers, Sunny had grown and matured. He had gone through countless battles and achieved many improbable victories. There had been harrowing defeats, too. Those had taught him as well. Preparing utensils for 3 people, Sunny looked into the distance and sighed. He would be turning 21 in about a month. There had been a time when he was not even sure that he would make it that far, but now, here he was. I don't really feel young anymore. Maybe someone like Wake of Ruin would laugh at these words, but Sunny truly felt that way. He had never really gotten a chance to be a child, and now, he was not a youth anymore, either. Am I old, then? As Sunny was pondering the vicissitudes of life, the hatch of the APC opened, and Nephi's came in, soon followed by Cassie. The two had been spending the last few days in endless strategy meetings, so both looked exhausted. The smell of freshly cooked food made both of them relax. Noticing the distant expression on Sunny's face, Nephi's tilted her head a little and asked, "What are you thinking about so seriously?" He flinched, then shook his head and continued setting the table. "Ah, nothing serious. I was just thinking that I'm too old for this crap." She frowned, then pierced him with a cold gaze. "I'm older than you, though." Her meaning was clear. "Are you calling me old?" Sunny grinned. Yes. Forget I said anything. Come, Nuna, let's eat. Who knows when we'll get a chance to enjoy a proper meal again." The two gave him strange looks and sat around the small fold-out table, looking down at the dishes he prepared. Well, really, there was just one dish, the everything potslop that Professor Abel had taught him how to make. Sunny sat down, too, and put a generous serving on his plate. "But honestly, you're not even a full year older than me, while Cassie is not a full year younger than me. So, let's speak comfortably." He put a spoonful of the weird slop into his mouth, then smiled at them. Cassie hesitated and cautiously nudged the slop with a spoon. "What even is that?" Sunny grinned. "Ah, I am glad that you asked. This is an ancient dish that has been passed down from person to person since the dark times. As I was told, it was initially inspired by corpse meat.